This is an instructional video on how to use the extrusion molder in the PET lab made by Nathaniel Noodleman and Scott Meyer.
If you have completed ETech 333, you will have sufficient training to use the extruder. As long as you've completed this training, you are free to use the extruder at any time the PET lab is open. This instructional video is intended to be a reminder of how to use the extruder, given that you've already taken ETech 333. Extrusion is defined as the process of shaping material, in our case plastic, by forcing it to flow through a shaped opening in a die. Extruded material emerges as an elongated piece with the same profile as the die opening. The extruder is located in ET-113, adjacent to the thermoforming lab. The extruder consists of 4 distinct sections, the first of which is the plasticizing section. First, raw material, often in pelletized form, is poured through the hopper into the feed throat. Next, the heated barrel and rotating screw help to melt, mix, and move the plastic toward the tooling section. For personal safety, it is very important that fingers stay clear of the feed throat. In addition, due to the extremely high temperature of the heating barrel, hot gloves must be worn at all times. It is important to note that polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, degrades at 410 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it degrades, it releases toxic hydrogen chloride gas. Be sure to not come close to this temperature when extruding PVC. In terms of the health of the machine, it is critical that the barrel be brought up to the appropriate temperature before extruding. This is to ensure that the viscosity of the soon-to-be melted plastic is low enough to avoid damaging the screw. The temperature required depends on the material used. The next section of the extruder is the tooling section, which consists of the die and the tips. The job of this section is to define the shape of the plastic being extruded. The selection of dies available is located adjacent to the extruder and on the south wall of the PET lab. This is also the location of the Allen wrench set that will be required to remove and reattach a new die. Once again, be cautious as the die and the extrudate will be very hot. The next section of the extruder is the cooling basin, where the viscosity of the extrudate will be reduced and the plastic will harden. Be wary of water spills on the ground, as these may be slipping hazards. The final section of the extruder is the puller, which pulls the extrudate at a constant rate to ensure that its dimensions are controlled. Be careful to not pinch your fingers in the puller. Handling the finished product continuously once it comes through the puller is known as take-up, and is the final step in extruding the plastic.
First main safety thing with this is to use hot gloves at all times, because the barrel will get very, very hot, the die will get very, very hot, and the plastic coming out of it will also be very, very hot.
Hot gloves can be found on the north wall of ET-113 in a drawer to the left of the rotational molder.
First thing you want to do when approaching the machine is you want to flip the switches for the temperatures. This will turn the machine on and start the heating process up. It will also start this fan here, which will take all the noxious fumes from the plastic away from the area. Each of these zones takes a while to heat up, so you want to make sure to start it early to cut down on as much time of the process as possible. Today we'll be using polypropylene regrind. We'll be keeping our temperatures about 400 degrees today to create the optimum viscosity for the plastics. What we're going to do is we're going to take these dials, move them up to around 400 degrees, and that will allow each of the zones to heat up to the desired temperatures. Next thing we want to do is we're going to turn on the water that will fill up the basin over here that will allow the part to cool as it moves through the system. First thing we're going to do, we're going to flip this switch, and then we use this switch down here to control the flow of the water. Once we get the ideal flow that we want, we can see that it'll come out of here, fill up this basin to allow for proper cooling of the part as it moves through the system. So if necessary, to move the water around in the basin, make sure it covers the whole area. Next step, we'll adjust these 3 rollers so that as the part exits the machine, it will go over the first one, under the second one, over the third one, and then through this machine. We need to adjust the rollers, unscrew these pins from both sides. You can then lift the whole roller system out, decide which hole you want it to be in for the relative position, and then place the system back on and screw the pins back in. This machine will create a steady flow. Once the part reaches in here, it will continue to pull it through, allowing for a uniform cross section as you make your part. To control the speed, you use this dial to choose which speed you want. Then you must turn on this switch to turn on the machine, and then this switch to run the machine. And then it will begin to run. Once the machine starts to heat up, you want to grab yourself a pair of hot gloves from the desk near the rotational molding machine. These will keep your hands safe as you're handling the die and the part as it comes out of the machine. This is the wall of dies that we have for the extrusion machine. Choose the appropriate one for the shape of the part that you want. Once you've chosen the die that you want, you need to take off the old die. Make sure to wear your hot gloves as the die that is on the machine already will be very hot. You're going to use a hex key to unscrew each of the screws on the die individually. Once you've chosen the die that you're going to use for your part, you want to screw it back on same way that you took the old one off. Get it started initially with your fingers, then use the hex key to finish screwing it in to expose your fingers to as little heat as possible. You want to have this guide about 1 to 2 inches from the end of the nozzle to provide for adequate spacing for the part to go through it. Even though we're not using PVC today, if you are, make sure none of your temperatures go above 410 degrees, otherwise the PVC will degrade and release toxic gas. Once your temperatures have reached the appropriate range, you will open up this and use this black start button to start the machine. Once you've begun extruding, you want to use your needle nose pliers to guide the part through the guide. This will allow for immediate cooling. You'll then keep guiding it over the first roller. You want to make sure to keep a constant pace to not stretch out or back up the part. You then go underneath the second roller, over the third one. Once you have fed your piece through each of the rollers, you are going to feed it through this machine at the back. It'll come out the other end, and it will keep it going at a constant speed to keep the uniform cross section of your part. This is an example of a small piece of a part we were able to make, uniform cross section in the shape that we wanted it in. Now that we are done making parts, I'm going to press the stop button right next to the start one, turn off all the heaters. Once you've turned the heaters off, you're going to turn off the water flow to the guide, turn off the water. You want to clean out any little plastic pieces that are left in the basin. Get it completely clear. And the basin will drain itself. Throw away all the scrap you don't need. Make sure to put away all the tools you use in the correct positions. Return the dies left out back to the board. And return your hot gloves to the drawer that you got them from.